Okay, we're live. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of The Agenda. Today we are having what perhaps right at the outset I can at least make one prediction about. Perhaps the longest podcast that we've ever had up until now. So that's a prediction that's certainly going to come true for our podcast today. So we will be having a series of different smaller discussions throughout the day as people sort of join in and as our audience grows through the day. Our plan for today is to focus on the United States presidential elections. At the same time, we would also sort of start focusing on the Congress results, right? That's the United States sort of federal legislative body. We'll also look at sort of some governor races, etc. But our primary focus is going to be the battleground states for the United States presidential elections. That's our focus for today. And we'll have multiple guests joining us, multiple panelists joining us throughout the day. We are doing this in two shifts. We're getting in a series of panelists for the morning for our current discussion. And then once again, later in the evening, we will be discussing, perhaps when we sort of are would have called the election, then we'll sort of discuss implications, if at all there's a difference into possible administrations and foreign policy strategic implications, apart from obviously the numbers and the crunching of the political sort of data, right? So for now, I'll be joined by Mr. Yash Joshi. Welcome.
Hi Ajay, good to be here.
Hi, welcome guys. And for add to the fun for today, we would be sort of trying to be as interactive with maps as is possible. And you can sort of comment in as you want us to sort of get in specific infographics or specific maps or specific data information, right? So again, credit where due. We're following New York Times presidential elections tracker, election results, and we'll be sort of going through sort of different channels as and when we get the one which produces the fastest and the most accurate results, right? So guys, some sort of basics. Let's begin with Florida, right? For our audience that has started to tune in on all our platforms, we are looking at Florida going the Trump way, right? So Florida was supposed to be one of the battleground states, but clearly we see an ample margin for Donald Trump over Joe Biden, right? With 94% of the votes that are coming in. Arjun, any initial comments on this?
Yeah, the Florida results are quite interesting, actually. Very surprising, actually. Sorry, all of the polls showed Biden ahead, but suggests that the Cuban voters really did not take to Biden's message, and Trump was far more palatable to them. So, and it's in a really important state. Going back all the way to 2000, which it was a very interesting election with George Bush. Um, I suspect Florida is almost certainly going to go for Trump right now, even though it's not yet been called. But again, Biden doesn't need Florida to win. If Trump winning Florida gives him a solid edge. But again, it's nothing is certain with Florida.
Absolutely, I think that's exactly on point. That it's not necessary for Joe Biden to win Florida for whatever is the path. He's got a wider path in that sense to the White House, and in that regard, so it's essential for Trump to win that, and that gets us to obviously the battleground states, right? The states that we will specifically be looking at. Certainly, Florida is sort of getting closer to Trump, right? So that battleground or that sort of clash is sort of pretty much finishing that. We obviously also have Pennsylvania, which is going to be a close one, right? That's what we've been told up until now, at least, with 32% of votes coming. Again, it's a big state with 20 electoral votes, so that's going to be important, right? Though currently we see about a 200,000 vote lead for Trump, but this is just with 30% votes coming in, so we're not going to make any calls about that. Then again, we see that there's a likelihood that Biden could win even without winning Pennsylvania, though that's going to be a really difficult path. But then at the same time, we also have Ohio, which is also been close to the morning, but with about 74% in, Trump's leading with about 200,000 votes. But that again is only about 74%. And Michigan is another state which Trump won in 2016. Right now he seems to be up, but not a lot of votes are in. Same with Wisconsin. Again, Trump's up by a bit, but then again, we still have a lot of votes to count still, right? Another state which is going to be of some relevance is Arizona. We have about 75% already coming in. So that's something that's quite fast. And Arjun, we were discussing this before the podcast. If you'd like to sort of come in on this as well. Again, we're just giving a very brief overview for our audience here. So, Arjun, any comments on the fact on Arizona? Again, there's still a margin there. And at the same time, I'm going to welcome Dhananjay onto the podcast.
So,
welcome, Dhananjay. Hi. And Arjun, any comments on Arizona?
So a mixture of comments. So you'd mentioned Michigan and Pennsylvania. It's true that right now it's strongly leaning towards Trump, but both Michigan and Pennsylvania have laws preventing them from opening mail-in ballots till the polls close, while Arizona doesn't, which is one of the reasons why Arizona has already such a large number of votes counted. And mail-in ballots have been favoring and leaning towards Biden overall. So I'd hold off on reaching any judgment on the Michigan and Pennsylvania lead. But Arizona is surprising. Maricopa County, which is supposed to be one of the biggest predictors of who's going to win Arizona, is 10 points in favor of Biden. So Arizona is a big win for Biden if he managed to carry that through. It's
in terms of a path. Sorry, yeah.
No, it's a state that Trump definitely would have liked to have as a path to victory.
No, absolutely. I think it's going to make the path much easier. Again, it's 11 electoral votes, and at the same time, but he still has a path without Arizona, right? If he can get Wisconsin and Michigan and assuming sort of Pennsylvania, can he sort of get a path then, or would he need Ohio to also win?
I think he would need Ohio, but Pennsylvania is larger than Arizona. It's 20 electoral votes. Absolutely. So if he manages to carry Pennsylvania, that's huge.
Yeah, I think, again, Trump won Pennsylvania last time. So on some level, it's necessary for him to win this as well, right? Like, he can't, like, the path without Pennsylvania looks very difficult, because then he'll have to win basically every other battleground, and that's not going to be that easy. Right, let's have a look at the battleground states here. So again, Arizona at this point is still sort of favoring Biden. At the same time, Minnesota. We'll get to these states. Let's get in sort of initial comments from Dhananjay and Yash, and then we'll sort of look at. So we'll start looking at sort of specific states. So Dhananjay, Yash, if there are sort of initial comments that you guys would like to make, we'll sort of get you guys on board. I think they're sort of currently muted. Okay, yeah, fine. We whenever you guys want to come in, feel free to. Okay, so Arjun, sorry, we were at Arizona. We said that that's a path for Trump that's going to. It's going to be a much easier path. So just 75% coming in on this. And let's sort of go back to sort of Florida just to get a sense of, okay, there's 94% that's in, and the results are pretty much favoring Trump here, right? This is close to 400,000 lead. So it's not going to be easy for sort of Biden to sort of get this. I think they should have pretty much called it for Biden at this stage. Oh, sorry, for Trump at this stage, right?
They should have. And I think if you go down to the breakdown county-wise, it's mostly the urban city centers that have already turned in. It's only the rural parts that are still to turn in, and they typically favor Trump. So I think it's a lock-in. We can almost guarantee Florida will go to Trump.
Because I mean, even if you go by sort of percentage, you need sort of 6% of the vote, and would the entirety of it even sort of translate into the kind of lead that Trump has for Biden to catch up? Probably not, right? So I think on that end, Florida is pretty much done. At the same time, let's look at Ohio, right? This is another race which is going to be crucial for Trump, right? Again, for both parties because it's 18 electoral votes for starters, and at the same time there is again, this is the Rust Belt, right? So we're looking at pretty much the same pattern that we've been looking at elsewhere. Though I think the initial sort of exit polls were suggesting that at least within sort of the Hispanic voters, you had Biden sort of not doing as well as even Hillary did. Right. So that was,
Yes,
and
that's right.
this is again, Nate Silver just sort of recently tweeted that listen, the Florida trend is not going to be something that's going to apply throughout the country, but this might be the case with at least Ohio here. Yeah. So Dhananjay, hi, welcome. So any initial comments on how things are looking?
Well, first of all, I think the interesting part is that they managed to sort of pull off this election in the middle of a pandemic, and I think that
Yeah.
in itself is quite an amazing achievement on part of the Americans. And I mean, it's I think a model that many people, including in maybe Bihar, need to sort of follow to be able to do it without causing too much of a problem for the health services. But I mean, what's interesting is that a lot of news channels in India are now sort of calling it in favor of Trump by quite a margin. And I was a little sort of perplexed by the way it was looking there, considering that I thought it was a bit early to make such strong judgments about what was happening.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting, it looks like a very interesting sort of an outcome where I think in Florida, the sort of Cuban diaspora sort of pushed Trump towards a, if not a victory, to a very close sort of contest with Biden. And some of the key battleground states don't seem to be going the way most people had predicted.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, we need to sort of count for the mail-in ballots that will come in, and I think we are very far away from any conclusive sort of result or any uh, or any position to be able to sort of pass a strong judgment on what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Let's see how that works out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's it's still pretty early for even sort of American media outfits to sort of call the election. I don't know which of the Indian news channels are sort of calling the election in that regard. Though I did get a sense that, again, I have multiple screens open on different sites. I did get a sense that I think at least Times Now is running CBS, right? I think they've sort of completely outsourced at least that business. So that's we can sort of have comments coming in on that as well, most certainly. But again, on CNN is also not calling anything as such, right? Again, also because it's just a bit about the vote coming in. Right? This is about 70. Now they're saying okay, 55% coming in Michigan. But another interesting part that I want to sort of open up, and Arjun, if you would like to come in on this, and Yash, Dhananjay as well, right? I want to look at Virginia. Right now, this is something that genuinely perplexes me. Yeah, and I might be wrong as well, right? But this is a very sort of preliminary understanding of mathematics, right? This is elementary mathematics. Though I might be wrong here in the sense that these are the high density sort of areas where Biden is winning, right? But Biden, or purely the vote share in the state, is far behind Trump, right? This is 55% votes coming in, right? At the same time, right, this is New York Times had called it for Biden when the vote share was about 8%, right? With Trump leading at that point as well, right? It was consistently 8, 13, 18, and now it's at 55. And we see that despite the fact that Trump is leading on the vote share in the state, it's being called for Biden. Is it because the areas where Biden is leading are the high um, sort of population density areas, and ultimately those will go to Biden? Arjun, any comments on that?
Well, I mean, Virginia was carried by Clinton as well, quite not comfortably, but she won that as well. I think in large part it's because the urban areas have a lot of colleges, have a lot of universities, and there's a dense population there, considerably denser than the rest of the state. It's the rest of the state is almost similar population density to West Virginia, a really sparse population. So it's unsurprising to me in a lot of ways that Virginia was called instantly for Biden almost. It's almost become like a guarantee to the level that New York is. Can't be that
Sure.
complacent, but it's almost there.
Let's sort of try to zoom in on this and get a sort of better sense of what it looks like, right? My problem is not with the fact that, okay, it's been a sort of democratic stronghold and sort of Clinton won it as well. So I think a vice presidential candidate was also okay. Clearly shows us that we're freeloaders and we need to sort of go back to the the basic results that we were trying to sort of see. Right. No, my problem was with the fact that at 8% with Trump leading, you can't call it for the other guy, right? Again, I'm not sort of saying that Biden can't win it, right? Again, perhaps if we go by the logic that okay, these are high population density areas where it's going to happen, but even a higher population density is not going to be sort of matched by sort of a higher vote share in favor of a particular candidate, right?
Certainly,
Ultimately, he's
yeah.
going to look at who got more votes, and
Mhm.
that's what it's going to sort of come down to.
Yeah.
Dhananjay, any comments on this?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the map, but
Yeah.
I'm
So
just kind of
that's what we
reading
have.
on.
Let's look at, okay. So we have Richmond here, where um, Biden's leading by almost 70 odd percent, right? Um, this is 11% of estimated votes have been reported. So perhaps the assumption here is that all of these people will end up voting for Biden. This rest of the 90% vote share here is going to go to Biden. So perhaps based on that logic, we can expect a Biden victory in the state. Now, again, we're seeing sort of 65, 60 odd percent vote shares coming in favor of Biden, with still just 18 odd percent sort of coming in most of these areas. Let's look at the smaller pockets. Again, this is 60% plus. This is still about 51.5, 55,
The
57.
most overwhelmingly blue county is Norfolk.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, okay,
If you go
yes, here,
there,
here it is. Okay.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, there you go. You have the population density right there with about 62% coming in Norfolk. You have about 74.5%, even almost 75% vote share going into Biden. Now, here's the thing there, okay? You have 62% coming in here. Richmond was at? Richmond still have 11, so I think Richmond is what they're sort of banking on, right?
Mhm.
And, but still with sort of 90%, 80% sort of coming in sort of Charles City, Surrey County, Sussex County. So this is going to be, it's going to be difficult for them to rely. Again, this is not, there aren't many votes here either, right? This is just about sort of 3,000, so 5,000 votes in all, 6,000 votes in all, and that's pretty much it. And again, here again with 98% of the estimated votes reported here, and though it's pretty much even here, right? Biden's is sort of on a 51.5% lead here, but I think they're going to sort of rely on Norfolk, Richmond, and the like. So I think that's the basis on which sort of most channels are sort of calling it for Biden, Virginia, right? But let's see. I think from my side, it's going to be still too early to sort of call. Okay, we have folks coming. Okay. Okay, fine. Yes. just have some people joining in, so we'll sort of take in comments. Okay, let's sort of go back to Ohio. We're getting in results in that end as well. But again, Ohio is also too early to call in that sense. I think most places still are. Now, the interesting part here is, and Arjun, we were just discussing this a while back, that we have sort of these forecasters for Florida, North Carolina, but we don't have one coming in either for Biden in Arizona or Ohio for Trump. Right? Despite the fact that you have about 82% coming in here, which is, I think, on some level a good thing, that they are being conservative with calling things just on about 80 odd percent.
So if you look at Ohio, it says that postmarked ballots have until November 13th to arrive. So there's a long window, a huge window, where the results could easily swing. So yeah, I think Ohio, they're not going to call today. It's almost a given that it's not going to be called today.
Again, so that gets me to the other very interesting question here. That on some level, perhaps this is not going to be an election where either party is going to concede. Right? We've had these discussions for a while, but the important part here is that you have mail-in ballots coming in, right? We have had the Supreme Court, despite sort of it having a sort of alleged sort of majority of really extremely conservative judges. Not really the case. Sure, most of them have been appointed by Republican presidents, but at the same time, most requests are sort of for ballots that have been sent by third, in most cases, have pretty much been entertained by the Supreme Court, and the decisions have been that okay, we will let these ballots come in even till later stages. Right. So that is going to be a significant factor, right? And this is something that we've been sort of seeing for a while as well. That sure, maybe just on the basis of sort of polling day numbers, Trump might have a lead, but ultimately it'll be the votes where the votes for coming in through the mail-in ballots where we will get some differences in terms of how the pattern is, or in terms of sort of who ends up winning certain battleground states, right? So, what are the changes like, at least in terms of, sure, the number of sort of people voting through mail-in ballots must have gone up significantly since sort of last time, but Arjun, we were discussing this earlier. What is the significant difference in terms of the total number of people who voted in and the ease of voting sort of going up, even for sort of what are the numbers like for young voters? Because sort of older voters we can sort of get a sense anyway, right? But what do the numbers look like when it comes to sort of mail-in ballots, just in a sense of comparison with 2016?
So yesterday or day before yesterday, there was an article, I forget who by, which compared the total number of mail-in ballots compared to the total voter turnout in 2016. And for most states, it was in the high 60s to high 80s range. So in some, Texas and Alaska in particular, more than 100%. So if more than 100% of the people who voted in 2016, a larger number sent in mail-in ballots already. So voter turnouts are definitely going to be much higher this time around, because this doesn't even account for people who have sent their ballots and not yet been received, or even election day voting. So the ease of voting is a big deal. And the fact that the elections results can be counted till as late as the 13th even, I think it's going to, I mean, I'm not sure what effect it'll have, but I suspect it will favor Democrats. So
Yeah, I think that's something that's been on the cards for a while, right? That it will end up favoring Democrats in most sense. While that has been the norm with sort of mail-in ballots, sort of generally, but certainly I think that sort of dynamic changes a lot in the circumstances of sort of a COVID situation, right? We might see sort of a lot of really old voters, right, in terms of sort of age even, right, or even sort of those who've been sick or would generally be sort of cautious before sort of moving out, especially for an election, right? Just on the sort of sheer number of people who would be out to get out on the street, right? Maybe a lot of people there would just send in their votes, even those people who you would expect to otherwise sort of get out and vote, right? So perhaps that dynamic regarding sort of mail-in ballots benefiting Democrats might not sort of hold necessarily for this year round, right?
Sure. The only comment I have is mail-in ballots. People have been pushing very hard on, and most states have made it very, very easy to send in a mail-in ballot as well. So it's not only that the mail-in ballot numbers have gone up; it's also become considerably easier to vote via mail-in ballot. So in some states, every registered voter automatically gets a mail-in slip. You don't even have to request it. You don't have to do anything. So there is a big movement in terms of not only adoption of mail-in ballot, also but ease of adoption of mail-in ballot. So those are two different things. And with that second factor, I think a lot of relatively complacent voters will vote. And the question is, which way will they vote? So, and the suspicion is that they will vote Democrat, but there's no reason to automatically assume that.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? And that sort of gets me to the next point that I'd like to raise. And Yash, it'll be great if we can sort of have you on for this as well. That on some level, the assumption, right, especially in terms of polling, right? So a lot of people, and Arjun, we've had this discussion earlier as well. A lot of times, many of the pollsters and many sort of media outlets have commented that, okay, fine, these are the chances of Trump winning. Trump's chances don't look too good, but at the same time, you have this margin of error from last time, right? So, what are Trump's chances if the polls are as bad as they were last time round, and they say Trump's still losing by a huge margin, right?
Yeah, hi.
So,
Yeah.
yes. So, yeah, some sort of initial comments in that regard. We obviously bring in some of Nate Silver's golden tweets. Again, that's not a pun on the name, right? That was absolutely organic here. But some initial comments here shown sort of polling on just the sort of the impossibility of genuinely predicting elections. Right? Ultimately, he's an aggregator. But perhaps there's a certain sense of arrogance that's been attached to sort of sticking to the results and saying, listen, this guy just can't win. And then last night, we see sort of a shift in comments. Listen, if he loses Pennsylvania, Biden's an underdog. Right? And then people sort of bouncing in, listen, you already called the election for Biden months ago, so you might as well not sort of jump in on this. Right? So some initial comments from your side pertaining to sort of polling and sort of the rest of the environment. We're discussing Florida as well. Sort of the Hispanic vote surge in favor of Trump, the narratives sort of changing completely, that's changing in a sense with the mainstream media. So some comments on that, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks for having me. So, if you look at this whole business of predicting polls and elections based on public consensus, based on just checking the people's mood, it's a relic of the last century. It's a relic of the time where a handful of mainstream media corporations have sort of built and controlled the larger consensus that people are having. And what's more interesting about the 2016 election, and even strongly more so about the 2020 election, is that power shift of building consensus it's gradually shifting away from a mainstream outlet like a New York Times or a Washington Post to something more organic like Twitter or Facebook, right? Largely smaller sort of groups are forming up where information is rapidly being exchanged and atomized. And while it was earlier possible to sort of just poll a few information outlets and see where the mood of the public is heading, these outlets are sort of expanded exponentially over the past 4 years, 8 years. Instead of having one New York Times where readers can sort of suggest their polls coming in, you have 5,000 different Facebook groups, each for each county, right? So, I mean, when you have exponentially more data to deal with, which is much more harder to access and mine, you're not getting the complete picture of what the situation is like. And then whatever predictive models, whatever heuristics you apply to predict any results, they're going to fail because eventually you're not getting the whole picture of the data, right? There was a lot of data. There was lot of data from fixed sources earlier. There's even a lot more data from various sources now. And the very fact that we're not able to sort of mine that pulse of the people, it's just because things have gone infinitely more complex. So,
or also on some level, right? Like just to add to that bit about complexity, right? Not in the sense that okay, people or pollsters can't sort of predict. Sure, that point sort of stays, right? But on some level, and a lot of people were sort of disregarding this, and people often say this. Listen, I don't know a Trump voter who just wouldn't shut up about being one, so there possibly cannot be shy Trump voters. Well, that's the whole point, right? You have a couple of people who won't sort of shut up about it, but people who are shy Trump voters aren't going to be talking about or aren't going to say that they are Trump voters. That's the whole point. And on some level, again, I'm not going to go down the line of let's just Scott Adams and the like who say that listen, people have deliberately sort of sent in messages to pollsters saying, listen, we're going to vote for Biden, when they sort of knowingly sort of were lying to pollsters when they had sort of complete mind to sort of vote for Trump. But at the same time, uh, not saying that okay, fine, they sort of wanted to scam pollsters, but that's the, in a sense, the beauty of what we call the sort of closed ballot, right? Sort of, it goes back to let's say the Victorian era, right? Sure, about over 100 odd years ago, that well, I'll vote the way that I have to. I don't need to tell anyone about it. And that's the sort of movement away from a serfdom-controlled democracy or the dirty boroughs, as we sort of call them back in sort of Victorian England, to sort of how it is at this point. Right, this is pretty much similar. So we saw back in the day that you had sort of serfs being told, or sort of whosoever had a sort of right to vote against serfs, sort of still taking it far back, that if they're sort of working on the land of a particular person or their sort of employer or the like, they pretty much control that vote because it's done out in the open. Right? But we see that after a certain point, um, when sort of votes started becoming sort of closed after the sort of electoral reforms happened, you saw a sort of difference in terms of sort of genuine preferences sort of coming out. If we talk about it in sort of economic marketplace parlance, consumer preferences. And so that's something if we talk about in the sense of sort of polls that people don't sort of necessarily reveal sort of their preferred outcomes in such polls. Would you agree with that, Arjun? Dhananjay? Any comments to that?
Just
And not
breaking
saying
breaking
that
news.
the elections are a call, but on a separate point completely, purely on polling.
So, sort of small sidestep to that. Breaking news: California has been called for the Democrats. Who would
Oh.
have guessed it? But I'm not completely convinced that polls are meaningless, and that a lot of people still do respond to polls, and their error rates are not as high as it's made out to be. I know lots of people like to talk about the 2016 election as a huge repudiation of the polling and the polling methods, but if you look at popular vote tallies, it was close. There were some mistakes in state level polls, sure, but no state had like a more than 4 or 5% error swing. 4 or 5%, is that huge? Yes. Usually the error margin is plus minus 3%.
True.
But I mean, Trump's 2016 victory was hinging on about 90,000 votes. If that had gone the other way, the result would have been opposite. So it's not a huge number in a relatively large country. So I don't think we should throw polls under the bus yet.
No, absolutely. I think I'm not sort of just on sort of the fact that okay, how these particular polls are going to turn out to be, but like if you look at the last few years, right? If you look at Brexit, if you look at sort of Trump 16, if you look at Bihar last time around, right? Dhananjay, if you'd like to sort of come in on that, and we also have Karthikeya joining us, who's welcome Karthikeya, who I believe is also in the United States at this point, right?
Hi guys.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, it clearly looks like he's not very impressed with how the results are going at this point.
What are you saying, Ajay? What are you
I'm
saying?
saying your voice makes us feel like you're not very impressed with the results as they look at this point. Well, they aren't results for that matter.
I mean, it's hi guys. First of all, I'm Karthikeya. I don't know either of you, but knowing that you're in Ajay's company, you must be nice guys. So, hello.
Karthikeya, we're already live, huh? So,
I know. That's how I saw you live, and then I thought I'll just maybe join in for a bit. So,
yeah.
I'm still not stressed because it's still early days. I mean, Virginia,
So
Fairfax County is voting for Republicans, so we're still in early days.
let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, we were on that earlier,
Yeah.
and wait. So is it currently red?
No. It's so Biden's leading, but it's. I mean, the Republicans are doing well. Trump's doing well in that area.
So he's gonna. Okay, here it is. Okay. Oh, this is damn close, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So I mean, which is why I'm saying it's still early days, and
Oh, it's early. It is early. No doubt.
yeah, it's everything is moving at a snail's pace. I mean, I think this is the one area where you think that the Indian electoral system is better than the US's because at least we do the counting fast. Whatever might happen before that is subject to discussion.
Also,
but
I think we were discussing this earlier as well, that on some level, another big plus that I see for the Indian system is that we can actually have ID cards for everyone, right?
no,
I don't know.
I think the biggest takeaway for your Indian audience should be the fact that there's no election commission in the US.
So that's another aspect.
Every state government has its own rules, and every state government has its own regulations. They govern the election. So if you see any of the movies related to the 2000 Al Gore Bush sort of controversy in Florida, you'll see that the key sort of person who was called in at a very late hour wasn't an election commissioner. It was a Secretary of State of Florida State.
Absolutely.
So it's basically saying that Amit Shah is the Home Minister in Gujarat. There's a problem with Modi's election. You'll call Amit Shah at 3 in the night. There's something wrong with the election. Fix it.
On some level, I think that changed to some extent in the 2016 election as well, where much of the election machinery was federalized. Right. This was during the Obama administration's last months of the Obama administration, at least.
I mean, but given the current sort of COVID context, regulations are so important in determining the final outcome of the election. It becomes sensitive towards these mechanisms. I mean, I'm not aware of what you're saying. I'm sure it's correct, but what I understand is that there are rules and regulations that are at the discretion of the state government. So, for example, this whole controversy about until when postal ballots will be counted, until what date, blah blah. All this falls under the state government's purview. So it's very fascinating.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go on.
No, I'm saying not just that, but also who gets postal ballots. In Texas, you need to have an excuse to receive a postal ballot, while in places like, I think, Michigan, you automatically get a postal ballot. So that too makes a huge difference.
It's very interesting. Somebody said the other day, the heterogeneity across the states in the US vis-a-vis India, a very simple one sort of statement difference. There's an old face I see. Hello.
Hi. So we also have Sharon joining in.
So the US is a federation of... Yeah, sorry.
At Cornell, who's also joining us from the United States. So welcome, Sharon. Hi. And Karthikeya, yes.
Now, I was just saying the US is a federation of states that stay together. India is a federation of states that's held together.
Yeah, so I think that's on some sense.
And they stay together on the condition that, you can't infringe upon our rights beyond a point as the federal government. So this is one of those components.
Yes, I'm sure.
Arizona is getting very interesting. Arizona, Biden leading.
Arizona has been a surprise package for the night.
It's been the only pleasant development, I think, for the night. So far.
Yeah, with the Biden lead, if you're a Democrat tuning in from anywhere in the world, or even leaning towards a Democrat, Arizona is like the only pleasant one because others are too close to call, and Trump is leading in most of the.
I think Michigan. The difference is 13 percentage points right now.
Yeah, but Michigan, I think, is around 35%, 40%.
40% counting. Yeah,
40% of the vote.
Wisconsin's very close. Biden
Wisconsin is definitely
47,
very close.
Trump
Wisconsin's
50.
too close for comfort. Pennsylvania, it depends.
Pennsylvania again, it's a double-digit lead.
It's a
Trump.
double-digit lead, but it depends on what
40% counting.
percentage is
40,
the early
40,
vote and
40.
how much of it is Philadelphia
Yeah.
voting in. So,
And Michigan
counties
can.
haven't started voting in Pennsylvania.
Sorry, Arjun, you're saying?
I was saying Michigan can send in mail-in ballots till the 6th, and in Pennsylvania it's till the 13th. So for both of them, it's not going to get called today. It's very unlikely. There's a long way to go before both of them are called, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Also,
that's the sorry, Ajay, go on.
No, sorry. Please.
No, that's the other thing. No, you don't know at what point the election will be called.
That's
that's the interesting part, right?
Yeah, that's the interesting
So
part.
we've been discussing this with a lot of folks, and there's quite a possibility that perhaps even Pennsylvania, I think you might have more election lawyers moving into Pennsylvania and have been over the last few weeks than you have sort of spin masters. I don't know how to sort of give it a better terminology, but the idea here is that there is a possibility, right? There is a remote possibility, but there is a possibility that ultimately the Pennsylvania election is something that goes to the Supreme Court of the United States, right?
If either of the two if it's a decider state, then yes. If either of the two candidates sweeps, yeah.
Absolutely. You see, also for it has to be damn close, right? We're still sort of far away. We're just in about 42% coming in. So Pennsylvania is anyway going to take some time.
Acha, isme bhi, Ajay, there is this interesting part. I think Arjun can maybe elaborate on this a little more.
Yeah.
That in some states the postals will be counted first. In some states the in-persons will be counted first. So, and there is a very clear partisan divide as to who has voted in person and who's voted via postal.
Yeah.
With the former being the Republicans and the latter being the Democrats. So I think maybe one of you can explain that.
Pennsylvania are going to go into at least tomorrow. Tomorrow. I know I think Wisconsin is also going to at least tomorrow. Yeah. So it depends on state by state
rules. That's what I'm saying. So that is the other interesting dimension to look at. That if say Pennsylvania, right? I don't know what the law in Pennsylvania is, what the rule is. If the early lead for Pennsylvania is coming because of the early voters or the voters in person who've come in today, then this makes sense because you would expect the pro-Trump voters to turn up today. And if the postals will be counted later in Pennsylvania, this number might change. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think approximately 18 to 20% of the vote in Pennsylvania that's been counted is early votes, and I think the remaining is in person. So that's a real possibility, but again, it depends. So right now, Biden holds around 192 electoral college votes. So it depends.
But primarily, because abhi California was called.
Exactly.
So that is the one that gave him the bump. Yeah.
It depends on which states now flip because Florida is on the verge of being called. It's 95% more or less.
Trump,
it's a razor-thin margin. North Carolina is a razor-thin margin. It's I think around 1.5.
Wait, you think Florida is going to be called Trump?
No, I think that's a foregone conclusion, right?
It's almost a foregone conclusion. North Carolina's more. It's a razor-thin margin. It's around I think 1.5%. If you look at what's happening right now,
perhaps North Carolina is going to be closer. But
North Carolina is going to be closer. So
Florida is pretty much in. Right? I think
Florida
we have 94% coming in, and I don't think that remainder of 6% is going to make a difference. No?
It's not. Considering I think there's around 300,000 votes, almost an approximately 300,000 vote deficit that's there. It seems a little sort of an outlier opportunity. But
where? Florida.
If I think if you even look at, and I was looking at the CNN projections, most of the states that have voted Democrat and which voted Democrat in 2016 have already sort of polled in around 95-96%. So if Biden has to take some magical lead from there, he's going to surge up in those particular counties. But most of the other counties, it's a clear Trump dominance.
Wait, so you're saying, Sharon, Florida is going to be called Trump because he's ahead by 300,000 votes?
Oh, more or less. I don't see Biden snatching Florida back. But clearly not going to happen.
So, by the way, Florida is this bellwether state, huh?
It's a bellwether state. It's a bellwether state.
So if Florida goes Trump, then if Florida goes the Trump way, then it will require a departure from a very old tradition for the election to swing Biden's way.
Yeah, but then
Ohio too, for that matter.
No, it depends on Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan.
No, I know, and this is just
Yeah.
the romantic in me, bellwether states.
No, the romantics are there all across U.S. news media right now. So you're not just the only romantic out there.
Yeah.
I've been making very sort of failed attempts at sort of trying to get in different sort of types of sort of infographics, etc., and sort of sharing it across. But clearly, let's sort of let that be. Let's go back to some of the states here, right? Again, Texas is something that I want to briefly just touch upon, right? Many have been saying that, okay, Texas is still something that can be called for Biden. And this is something that's been going on for years, right? Even for Hillary Clinton, we heard that, okay, she sort of campaigned a lot in Texas, etc.
Was Texas supposed to be called for Biden? Like
No,
not supposed to be called for in the sense
Texas.
of
So with Texas, the thing was, if Texas went Biden, the election is over.
Exactly.
Election is over.
It's so I think it's quite unlikely. Just to sort of brief touch upon that, right? Florida was still stuck around 94%. Okay, it's 97%. Let's give this a
97%.
So this
and
is pretty much
what's the difference in the voting?
Yeah, that's what I'm just refreshing that to get a better idea. Yeah, okay.
But Florida's counted 94%.
Yeah, I think Florida has been it for a while. It's though this shows about 94%, but we saw 97. So again, the difference is almost 400,000, right? It's
exactly.
380, 90,000 is in terms of the difference. We still will see how it is when it's sort of 97%. But I think it's unlikely that Biden's going to recover.
No, he's not.
I think we tried to do the math a while back. I think it was pretty much it. Right?
No, I think more or less everyone's given up. People are just waiting for a final call on Florida now. But
I think so mathematically that's done, right? Like even if you give all votes to sort of Biden from here, it's not like he can pull that off.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the Associated Press this time, their standard was 99.5% certainty before they call a race. But at the end of the day, a TV channel or even the New York Post or New York Times, calling a race doesn't really make any difference. We need to wait till the...
The other dimension with Florida this time was that there's a lot of old people in Florida, right? So there was this whole narrative that...
always the dimension with Florida.
The narrative that this case was that because of the poor handling of COVID by Trump, a lot of the older people suffered. And the perception went across that he didn't handle it well, so that constituency might have been affected. But clearly that's not worked. But
if you look at exit polls, for instance, it's close because a lot of the exit polls asked as to how Trump handled COVID. And for instance, if you look at CNN and a couple of other exit polls, they were close to almost 50% who said that Trump handled COVID well.
But my point is, it's in a state like that. So even if just the fact that 50% are still saying that he didn't do that is coming from that old voter base, which voted pretty decently, which was pretty decently behind Trump the last time. So that's what I'm saying, that the Democrats were expecting that factor might play in their favor, but clearly that hasn't happened.
Okay.
I think for them the focus was the people who sort of said that Trump handled it well. A lot of them just said that he handled it as well as he could.
So if you remember, there was this hearing, where the mask that was in Florida, that video that did the rounds on YouTube, that you are stopping God's machinery, you are making us wear masks.
Yeah.
So that's the younger people. So I'm sure that they are, saying, okay, Trump did it well, but I am agreeing with you. All I'm saying is that Democrats were betting on the fact that the older folks might be a little more pissed off, but that's not happened.
It's not happened. It's not happened.
Okay. So guys, let's sort of get back to some of the fun part of it, right? We're getting in sort of some sort of comments on this, but I want to get into something that's even more interesting, and that is Nate Silver's Twitter feed. Right? We sort of briefly touched upon this. We thought we will come back on this, right? We've been on polls, right? We've been on polls. We've been on arrogance. We've been on the fact that sort of pollsters, like Arjun said, right? This is not the night to sort of or this is not the time. I will call it towards the end of it when the results are out. But this is not the time perhaps to say, okay, that polls are over. That's one view that Arjun had brought up. But I'd also want to get in Karthikeya and Sharan in on this. That on some level, right, even if from here you say, I for once give you the sort of leeway to say, okay, Biden wins from here, right? I'm still sort of, just for the sake of argument, I'm saying even if Biden wins, still the polls have been wrong by such a huge margin, right? Sure, some of this is sort of still coming in, but they were predicting pretty much a landslide for Biden, right? And we see that in a sense of the arrogance where perhaps up until sort of even if we sort of compare it to 2016, right? It was not even till election morning day, right? It was election day morning in the United States in 2016, and you saw sort of the odds suggesting, and this is on the trackers from most of the media outfits at 90, 95 odd percent, right? If things don't go Biden's way here, right? This is not a comment on sort of media being hand in glove or malified intentions.
It's about the science. It's about the science, you're saying.
And that's the idea, right? That this is not a science. Precisely my point. That on some level, this is not a science. And when people
any
say,
any piece of economic research
It
is
depends.
both art and science.
It number one depends on the sample.
Yeah.
Also, number two, and I was listening to a 538 podcast just today morning, and 538 once again clarifies that it's not just their algorithm, it's what they project is also based on what other opinion polls project. So when they say that Biden has a 9 on 10 chance of winning, they say that you should not discount the other 10% chance that Trump has, because I clearly remember in 2016 there was an upshot NYT graphic that came up, which clearly showed that Trump had just 8 out of 324 possible combinations to win the presidential elections, and he more or less just followed one of those paths. So Trump last time won just 1 out of 8 possible combinations that he had available to him to win. So the fact that we were looking at a 90% favorable opinion poll on aggregate in favor of Biden was never a guarantee that Biden would really come out and win. So a lot of people had a complacency factor going in as well. And as I've been discussing with my friends over here as well, because I'm currently at an election party, there's this great sense of deja vu that's stepping in, because it's in a lot of ways turning out to be very, very similar to what happened in 2016, with a lot of these battleground states where Trump has just easily taken a lead once again, despite differing circumstances.
Talking about polls and 538, I think 538 just tweeted about how if Biden loses Pennsylvania but wins Arizona, there is a possibility for a 269 tie, which would be,
okay.
I mean, that would be amazing.
So
That would be amazing.
that question was from me also, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing that was for Karthikeya and me. So yeah.
Oh, yes. I think Nate Silvers just retweeted this as well. So yeah. Karthikeya, sorry.
No. I was just checking if you. Yeah. So I have a bit of a long-winded answer to that, and I'll just try to sort of maybe keep it as brief as possible. Though I don't think that you can reject the science component of it. Any economic study, as Sharan was saying, it depends on sample size, depends. So whenever you use the word depend, it means that there is an art to it. Once you've perfected the art, that's when the science comes in. So you can't say it's not a science. It's not only science, but you can't say it's not science. That's one. Second component is that I somehow, and I'm not getting a sense of deja vu. Until yesterday also, I was like, he might just make it, because we've had these experiences in India. 2019, there was this very strong narrative, oh, BJP will come down. It won't lose, it will come down. It went the opposite direction. And my God, the way it went up, right? So I broadly see this as a larger crisis in the field of psephology, and I'm way beyond my depth here because I am not a psephologist or don't even claim to have that much knowledge. But my sense, a very broad political economic sense, is in the last decade or so, you've seen the emergence of a very different kind of politics. a very different kind of demagoguery, if I were to use that word. And what happens is that your samples are collected in a way where the person who's responding is behaving in a very cerebral manner. The response that that person gives when a surveyor asks the question is based on cerebral analysis of at that moment. And then comes in, campaigning. Then comes in a bombardment of different kinds of messaging from these demagogues, which is at so many different levels so appealing to the basest of instincts that you end up changing your decision and you don't even know why. वो आएगा तो मोदी ही. Why? क्यों आएगा? वो नहीं पता. But वो आएगा तो मोदी ही. Can you explain that? You can't. That is
No.
my sense of even the US election. I mean, I frankly didn't think this was going to be a 9 on 10 case. Frankly, I didn't even, I was only looking at individual states, plus minus 1.1. Race was tightening in the last few days. Biden was ahead. The Democrats were absolutely correct in being very circumspect about all the leads. I was absolutely sure that this would not be a cakewalk. And it's proving out to be that. And I'm not saying that I'm the only one who thinks like that. Anybody who's experienced elections over the last few years, Brexit, who thought that would go through,
And
right?
yeah.
So I mean, I feel that pollsters are using the same old methods of analyzing a population that has changed or has been changed drastically over the last decade or so. That is my sense.
I'll just
Well, look at, for example,
point.
Sharan's home state, West Bengal. Who thought the BJP would secure the number of seats in the Lok Sabha elections that it did in West Bengal, in Odisha?
I'll just get in one.
Who thought that the BJP will sweep Tripura?
Exactly. No, I'll just get in one more point, because so again, I'll just go back to the exit polls a little, because a lot of the voters in the US, of course, they, like, if you look at the exit polls, they reject politics based on personality. And on paper, they're saying that, yeah, our vote is based on policy issues, handling of the economy, COVID, and all of that. But again, I think what is important for us to understand, and again, this is exactly where I sort of echo Kartikeya's point, is the fact that one side over here, that's Trump, even if he wins, even if he doesn't, but there's very important learning that one side over here has bridged the gap between politics and personality in a very, very powerful way. So you identify with politics and personality at the same juncture now, which is very, very important. You look at all the right-wing politicians, for instance, Modi, for instance, Donald Trump, you look at Boris Johnson, you look at Marine Le Pen. Their politics,
Erdogan,
and
Putin, Orban,
Erdogan,
you can
exactly.
go on and on.
Exactly. So you
Bolsonaro.
It's a very textbook populist sort of opinion of politicking, because
the movie is Shah Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan is not in the movie. The movie is Shah Rukh Khan.
Exactly. So you're tying in the politics, the policy, and the personality at the same point of time, to a point where you can't come out and say we are against climate change, but we'll vote for Trump, or we are against the unemployment rates and we are going to vote for Trump, or we are against racial injustice or all of that, and we are going to vote for Trump. It's if you're against racial injustice, you don't vote. You vote for Biden. But over here, the divide is so narrow. It's become a very, very distinct sort of new playbook for politics.
Sharan, I'm going to come in on that. Right? Again, not on the sense of making any sort of normative analysis here as to which person is against or sort of for racial justice or otherwise. Right? But we also had this sort of comment coming in from Biden towards the early stages of the campaign earlier in the year, right? After he became the candidate, that was, I think, on that sort of talk show where he said, listen, are you even black if you aren't voting for me? Right? So on some level, right, there is an arrogance attached to this sort of conduct and demeanor, and something that we also saw with Hillary Clinton, right? The fact that she lost in the Rust Belt, and this was advice given to her both by Bill Clinton and Obama, President Obama, that listen, these are the areas that you have to focus on and campaign in, right? And then you sort of take these areas for granted. Okay, blue collar workers, obviously they're going to vote for the Democrats.
I'll just step in, Ajay, and then I'll leave after this comment. So I have to say something. You brought in a beautiful point. You know why it's beautiful? It's because it's so right there in your face, but nobody wants to acknowledge the fact
Absolutely.
that till the time you doubt the voter's intelligence, even if the voter is voting for Trump or for Modi, you can never engage with the voter.
Yeah.
You cannot dismiss the fact that the narrative of hyper nationalism works. You can't
No,
say ये
see,
बेवकूफ हैं, ये कल सुबह उठेंगे, ये ठीक हो जाएंगे, तो ये
I'm
मेरे लिए
not
वापस
even on the
वोट
fact
करेंगे.
that okay, hyper
These
nationalism is
no
working. I'm
any
asking
any
you,
agenda,
why
any
people are
agenda,
winning or-
any
Huh.
agenda which to a college educated individual or any smart individual like yourself sounds crazy and freaky. It's working for the rest of the people. You have to accept the fact first, only then can you do a brand of politics which tries to engage with that population. Because what happens even in India is that we, at least the Congress has been doing this for a very long time, they're dismissing people who
Yeah.
vote for the BJP as saying you are stupid people. You can't say
That's-
that. You
Yeah,
have
that's a typical problem with the left in India.
across the world, I think, because there is this
Across the
very
world.
typical leftist paradigm that, Arey, this is the right way. Why are people going the wrong way? You know what? They will bump into a few cars, then they'll come on this side only. Arey, no, that other side is also one way on the same street. You just never saw it, and now you're saying that the other driver is stupid. You will, because of that, you will never meaningfully engage with that driver. Because of that, you will never have a chance of even interacting with the driver. And that is my submission, that this is a crisis of, I don't know whether you should call it intellectual arrogance, because there's nothing
No, it is.
intellectual
I
about it.
think
It's
that's
just
exactly
a lot of snobbery, and ideological monopoly, monopolization. I think it's time that people, wake up. Like somebody like Kejriwal, when he speaks to his masses, he's fighting against the BJP only. Okay? But listen to how he understands the fact that the voter is as likely to vote for me as he or she is for the BJP. I cannot say that if you're going to vote for the BJP, you'll be stupid. Nahin, that doesn't work. You can't diss the voter.
Absolutely.
Okay. On that note, I'm going to leave. Thank you so much.
Sure.
You guys
Sure.
have fun.
Thank you. And Kartike, we'll also be sort of having a podcast later in the night, right, where we are also planning to get in Mr. Deshmukh. And,
Yashwant Deshmukh.
Yes, absolutely.
He's in Dubai, though.
Sorry?
He's in Dubai.
Okay,
again,
guys, I'll have to step out because I'm
not aware of.
I'm in
But
the
yeah,
middle of
thank
a
you so
party.
much, Sharan and Kartik, for joining in.
Yeah.
We
Just
hope that
yeah.
will
Do you
join
just
us.
text me the details and I'll join that podcast.
Yeah, I'll
Certainly,
probably try
certainly.
to
We're
join it
starting
because
at
it's gonna
around
be morning
9.
for me. So
This is all for our viewers as well. Again, we'll continue with our podcast right away, but we're also coming on tonight at 9, and we'll go on till sort of at least 11 p.m. We're getting
All right.
Mr.
Okay.
Yashwant Deshmukh and Mr. Praveen Swami. So we'll be talking about other aspects in that regard as well.
So
but thank you so much, Kartik, for joining in, and thank you so much, Sharan.
Ajay, Arjun, Sharan, Dhananjay, thank you so much. I'll see you guys. All the best. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay, sure. All right, thanks. Okay, Dhananjay, hi. Welcome back.
Hi.
So we were discussing intellectual arrogance. We were discussing how a lot of times so political parties, and we see at least the trend has been over the last sort of half a decade, perhaps more, with the parties to the left of center or to the far left who sort of faced this sort of problem that they have been sort of, their support amongst the masses has been sort of dwindling, and to a certain extent they just attribute it to things such as racism or sort of hyper-nationalism or fascism or sort of other attributes that they wish to attach to their political opponents, right? Whereas the voters aren't that stupid, right? They're just going to say, listen, we can see through the BS, right? No matter what sort of country across the world. Any comments on that? I understand that we're sort of moving a bit beyond sort of merely sort of election, but I think that's sort of relevant to the context here. Post which we get Arjun in on this, and then we get to Nate Silver's feed.
Right. The interesting part, with such kind of like analysis is that you often, in most sort of discussions about elections or politics in general, the benchmark for what is maybe the winner, if not the right thing to do, then what is the winner is what the people sort of approve of, right? So, for example, a lot of times when people in India are criticizing the present dispensation, the retort that comes from people who support the government is that okay, but the prime minister's won by a huge margin. So when your benchmark for measuring what is a good policy measure or what is a good sort of strategy, what is a good election machinery, is that whether you're winning or not, it's somewhat of a tautology, right? Because and so therefore the counter is that yes, people don't understand what they're talking about. I think if you want to have a sensible discussion about the voters' IQ, the voters' ability to understand what affects him, you need to move away from this you know benchmark, for lack of a better word, where you need to sort of be able to evaluate the voter even on things that he doesn't uh, consciously sort of appreciate. So often enough, when you have, for example, the effect of, let's say, I mean, in India, when we had the coronavirus lockdown, we had this huge migrant labor crisis, and people, like, there were people on the streets walking 400, 500 kilometers, something that is agonizing to any individual, irrespective of where, when, and how. Uh, but if or for example, in demonetization, when we had this move by the government to sort of invalidate about 85% of the country's currency supply, they got the government was rewarded by several electoral wins. But the jury is still out on what effect it had on the economy and its subsequent sort of long-term impact on things like employment, etc. So my point is that when if you feel that a government's move is vindicated because the government got re-elected or because the people approve of that move, then this discussion is pointless, right? Then of course the voter is the person through whom you judge every policy measure. But if you want to have a more coherent discussion, you need to be able to understand that yes, sometimes people do in large groups believe in certain ideas which may factually be incorrect, right? So I mean, for example, this entire migrant voter crisis may still lead to, let's say, a vote again for the same government that was presiding over the migrant labor crisis. So I think that we need to sort of, in order to be able to have a better discussion on this, move away from this idea and be able to judge, let's say, based on a long-term, more comprehensive impact on things, and of course, where people have a room for disagreement. But that requires at an individual level the ability to say that okay, I don't know enough, right? I mean, in a country like India, for example, where the majority of people, I mean, large sections of the population are still uneducated. Many of them have had very primary levels of education. There are people who live in a lot of poverty. Uh, they, sort of, for us to be able to argue that, yeah, that they understand these complex sort of moves that take place, or whether it's, something like demonetization or GST. I mean, many lawyers today don't understand what GST is. And we are trying to say that, no, the population as a whole has vindicated a move like that by voting this government back in. I mean, I think that's a bit sort of a difficult proposition to sort of argue for. But at the same point of time, we also have, these other sort of arguments where we say that
Okay,
where
let's also sort of apply this to sort of extend this argument to sort of pollsters and sort of those in academia and the alleged intelligentsia, right? And on that end, Arjun, I'll sort of get you in on board as well. Sorry.
I mean, there's one thing. I mean, I was about to say, because I think what you were also hinting at is you have this argument that which a lot of people had with that stimulus package that Trump had proposed towards the sort of close to the election, and something that an argument that often runs in India in relation to, let's say, Manrega and things like that, is that you can just give this little incentive to the voter to vote for you at the end of your tenure, and you can secure his vote. I said those arguments don't go together, right? Is that if you say that the voter is so sort of gullible that he can be incentivized by this little, towards the end of your tenure, you do this little sort of handout to him, and he will vote for you irrespective of what you've done, for the past 90% of your tenure. You can't then also make the same argument at the same time that he's also understanding these complex policy measures that you've enacted, and he vindicates them actively by voting them. That's all.
Just to jump off on that point, I think that's definitely true. There's There's a wonderful book on this called The Myth of the Rational Voter, I think is the right title, which analyzes voter rationality and how voters actually think about things. Now, it's very unlikely that an individual vote in an individual constituency will change the election result. So, I mean, how much incentive does a voter really have to really dig deep and look through all the potential implications of the policy measures being recommended by the president, of the likelihood of those passing Congress? I mean, it's a much more complicated question than policy when the voter to determine how a voter is likely to vote. So I don't think it can be said it's necessarily an approval for a certain policy measure, it's approval for a certain direction, because what percentage of voters do you suspect are actually thinking through, hey, these are the 6 policy measures Donald Trump has suggested, these are the 5 policy measures from Biden. Overall, I like Trump's policy measures a little bit more. I think the downstream effects of that will have more positive impacts on me. I don't think no more than 10% of the voters at most will be thinking through it in that level of detail. It's more a level of instinctive reaction, a level of media coverage, a level of just, hey, I like this guy. No one, even political analysts don't go to that level of depth of explaining how a policy measure could have downstream effects on whatever outcome you're trying to achieve.
So I think that's a very
and
valid
just
point.
one more point.
Yeah, please.
Well, there is a definite left-wing tendency for intellectual arrogance. There's also been consistently a right-wing tendency for rejection of experts, which is also not an ideal situation to be in. You don't want to reject your economist and your scientists and your whatever. Trump's recent critique of Biden was that he would listen to the scientists. I don't think scientists should be determining policy. Sure, there are lots of other factors to consider, but should you consider a scientist's opinion on likely spread of coronavirus? Yes. But should a scientist's word be the final thing? Of course not. But it's something to think about as well at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Certainly. And that has to be a factor that is to be considered in terms of what is the final political decision that has to be sort of taken.
I think when you are visualizing sort of democracies, generally speaking, especially the kind of democracies that we representative democracies like ours, the politicians' task included amongst many things being able to bridge the gap that Arjun just spoke about, where you have sort of experts who understand what particular policy measures, and you try to bridge their sort of advice with what your constituency demands on a more immediate basis or on a more sort of sentimental basis. And I think that at some point we've started leaning one way or the other, and the left sort of leaning a bit too heavily on the expert side, and the right sort of leaning a bit too much on the sentiment side of the electorate.
Yeah. Okay. So again, on that, again, I don't want to get into sort of broader, more abstract notions about experts versus democracy versus so on and so forth. And while again we've touched on that, I want to specifically get onto once, just sort of at least briefly touch upon it. Like I said, right, for our audience at large, our intention here is also to sort of make this sort of a bit fun, a bit enjoyable. Very often we sort of have people, our audience, writing to us, listen, it's informative, we learn new things, but listen, for us, we also need to enjoy, we need to have some fun while you're at it. And I think that's the thing with elections as well. On some level, I think as we correctly said, and I want to sort of briefly touch upon the point that both of you made, and then I'll sort of get to this. That first of all, when we look at polls, very often polls cover two aspects, right? So you have two components or two questions, and at least that's been the case with sort of at least the Obama years that I can recall, is that you have two. One is the approval rating of how much you like the president, right? Another set of polls very often is, do you think the country is going in the right direction? Right? I don't know to what extent both of you are sort of familiar with this particular line of questioning for sort of the likes of Pew Research and that sort. But very often we've seen, especially let's say in the Obama administration, we saw that there's a high rating approval for President Obama himself. But in some cases, you saw that the rating for him, if you think the country is going in the right direction, the sort of polling was far lower. On some level, that poll sort of changes a bit in the sense of when you get to someone like Trump. I'm not saying that, okay, there is an entirety of sort of wave that says, okay, the country is going necessarily in the right direction or anything of that sort. On some level, as we progress with time, right, ultimately every older voter will say that the country will never go back in the right direction. Right, as people who sort of have our approach to sort of society, or at least not sort of get the both of you in on this, you can sort of speak independently. But my approach, right, would be that, or at least that school of thought which says that you can preserve and you must sort of, as a conservative, right, without any political affiliations here, right, as a conservative, it's very difficult to sort of preserve things. They're much easier to sort of break apart and sort of be destroyed much easily. So there has to be an added effort to sort of preserve and sort of conserve certain aspects of society, right? Whether legal institutions or sort of otherwise. So that's there, right? In terms of the direction that country is taking, which is effectively what you might say, okay, policy seems nice, or whether I like the guy or not, right? So that's something that I think does play up there. Again, like I said, we're getting back to sort of a certain sense of arrogance or whatever we might want to say. All right, so we know who Nate Silverese is, the editor-in-chief of 538. Again, he's also Signal and Noise, and on some level, I don't know to what extent you're familiar with Signal and the Noise, but on some level, much of what we see happening nowadays with at least the election polling is quite the opposite of what Nate Silverese claimed to sort of preach over the years. And he did get the Obama elections right, but even last time around 2016, he couldn't sort of get that right. And this year, clearly, I think I don't want to use the word meltdown right away because the election results are still away. This is what he's been saying as well. But let's just go over this tweet once, right? It says, nothing I've seen. Again, this is coming in a day or so ago. And this is, maybe this is this morning, in fact, like this is
Today morning.
this morning. And for those, we'll also sort of, or maybe you can make references to the earlier sort of tweets from the past where he's shown, okay, there's no chance Trump's winning. The polls, as we began earlier by saying, right, that the polls have to be further off from last time for Trump to sort of imagine any path to victory. And that's what they said last time, right? The polls have to be off by a margin never ever seen before. And this sort of gets back me to sort of Trump's point on, so not Trump's point, pardon me, Talib's point on sort of that river danger sign. Right? That's only going to show you till what point the last floods hit. That does not mean that the water is not going to go above that. So that's one characteristic. But here he says, okay, I'm going to read this out. Nothing I've seen or heard about the exit polls gives me confidence that they've figured out how to balance the different types of votes that are coming in. Lots of weird, somewhat incongruous results based on what's being reported, I would ignore. Now, this is coming in from an aggregator. Right, Arjun, I can see you smile already. This is coming in from a guy who does not do the polling himself. I'm reminded of my conversation with Mr. Yashwant Deshmukh earlier in the year before the Delhi elections. And we discussed exactly this point. Right? And so Silver brings this up. It says, listen, everything that has happened up until now, because it's not matching up with what I've said, let's change the theory a bit. Let's change the facts a bit, right? The idea being that, and this is where sort of, at least my critique, and again, not originally mine, it comes from so many people before me, is that, to quote sort of Lord Keynes on this, right? I change my opinion when facts change, right? The idea is that you can't sort of change facts to fit your theory. The idea is that you have to change your theory to sort of fit with what the facts are.
That's true.
And in that regard, we see a sort of tilt, right? Again, this is just something that this is just one of the many comments that we've been seeing this morning, right? And if you look at sort of other things, I sense a certain sense of arrogance, right? I see, because I remember earlier in the month, maybe over a month ago, he said that, listen, people with PhDs are very hard to convince. And I say this as a person with a PhD, that we don't sort of change our opinion about things even when presented with ample evidence. Now, these are things he's trying to say about people that who aren't convinced by what he has to say. Right? This is that again, I'm on the point that let's assume that even Biden wins from here, right? We'll go back to the polls in just a minute. Let's assume that Biden even wins from here, right? But what we're seeing, even after 94% coming in, 95, 97% vote share coming in states, Silver 538 and other pollsters have been way, way off.
Mm-hmm. The largest error has definitely been in Florida. And Nate Silver is hitting on the fact that
already seen Florida, Archer. We haven't seen the others yet.
Sure, the largest error so far has definitely been Florida, and a lot of the commentary seems to suggest that while waiting the polls, they didn't accurately account for the Cubans' vote share, which, I mean, sure, that's possible, but they could have got a lot of Hispanic vote share wrong, which is what some of the exit polls are suggesting. I think that's what Nate Silver is also hinting at there about the exit polls being wrong. But one thing to note about the 2016 polls versus the 2020 polls is post 2016, when the polls were there, Hillary Clinton grew quite complacent and didn't campaign as vigorously, and she took the polls at its word. Biden has not done that. He said, I know the polls say we're ahead, but that does not mean we're definitely won. It's still an awfully close race, and he's pushing for that. And I think that has two impacts. One of which is, of course, the more aggressively you campaign, you'll reach out to more people, but also a lot of people who are not particularly positive about Trump, but are fairly confident Biden will win, will now go out and vote in potential swing states. I think a definite loss that the high polling does do is people who are like, yeah, Biden's going to win anyway, or sorry, Hillary's going to win anyway, and didn't go out to vote in 2016. I think that number is going to be much less in 2020, but I'm still saying it's about 70% chance that Biden will win. But let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Dhananjay, before we go back to the map, I'm going to read this out for you, and any other comments that you want to bring up on anything Arjun said or we've discussed up until now. Right? He says the narrative here fairly dumb overall. Right? I don't know what side he's really referring to, but Trump's in a better position than he was at the start of the night. I'm just sort of recalling 2016 here, right? Biden's not going to win in a landslide. No, that's one change, right? That's the first change here. But there's still not a ton we know outside of Florida. Certainly, right? So as we were discussing, right? He's wrong on Florida so far. The rest is sort of still to be seen. And that data we do have is fairly mixed and not necessarily suggestive of a large polling error, as large a polling error elsewhere. Right? Now, again, going back to a couple of things. One, as big a polling error, not going to happen in Florida either. It's happened in Florida. Ultimately, sort of shows that this modeling business is, again, not sort of skeptical of the fact that, numbers would ultimately predict things, right? But the idea is that this modeling business is something that doesn't work. Right? That on the sense that ultimately, no matter what set you take, no matter how many large number of sample size, a large number of people you have in the sample size, ultimately the sample size cannot be entirely representative of the universal set. Plain and simple, right? I'm not making a very large claim here, right? I don't want to sort of say, okay, I'm anti-science now, right? Now, you would have sort of news channels that are reporting maybe 40 years from now. he commented on the fact he's against the models, anti-science and all that. But the idea is that this doesn't work, plain and simple, right? And this has been the larger critique, and I should say this as a student in economics as well, that economists don't get stuff right very often. And they never get them right if they're relying only on models. These models, okay, is it fitting the model or not? And any sort of comments, some last comments on this issue before we sort of head back to the map?
I think that this is something that I think we've been discussed before, but a large part of the problem with most of these sampling with these surveys is that other than the sampling part of it is also that there's a bit of a growing distrust of these agencies, generally speaking, and people are not very forthcoming in their most honest of feedback. So even when you ask, when you go out to do these surveys, your surveyors are not very trusted by the respondents. So they're not able to, the respondents are not able to open up to them about their preferences, and this is sort of accentuated the climate that has been created on like sort of in terms of echo chambers and sort of groups on both
Yeah.
sort of camps, where your political preferences are now like sort of something that you are actively the sort of judged upon in other aspects of life as well. And that sort of atmosphere that is created, if you're a Trump voter or a Biden voter, you're having issues in your like conduct of social life and things like that. That makes people more apprehensive about telling what their voting preferences really are. Right? And I mean, this is a phenomena that has been mundanely seen in a lot of other things, but it's like very, very openly, like now becoming trend in electoral sort of politics, where if you are a supporter of Donald Trump, you are not wanting to say that in front of Biden supporters, and you are cagey about your political opinion. The United States, I am like sort of I'm sort of made aware, is was at least more open about this for a long time. In India, most people don't like to tell who they vote for, but with that coming in, obviously these surveyors may not be actually getting true responses from people because of a distrust of who they are, and the respondents sort of fear of being clubbed in as a potential voter, and therefore having other kinds of issues that they're aware of, minor as they may be, they affect individual responses in different ways in surveys, and that's, I think, a large part of why a lot of surveys go wrong. For example, in certain parts of the, I'm sure in certain parts of the country, a Trump voter would not want to openly say that he's a Trump voter, and there may be a large number of them for any number of reasons, right? And that sort of contributes to a lot of what why the surveys go wrong. Some people call it a shy voter effect. The others in India, it's called the undercurrent. Uh, so, I mean, that's something that surveyors still need to account for, that they may be, being misled or being lied by the voter because they are not trusted anymore.
Arjun, I want to also get you in on this. You have the tweets in front of you, right? So, for reference, Miss Hill is a contributing writer for The Atlantic, right? And hosts the podcast on Spotify and all, right? And I think for our audience, and I think both of you can sort of read the tweets and you can sort of present your comments on this. Again, this is still emerging trends and all. I don't want to get into sort of necessarily the nature of the identity politics bit, but on sort of just getting to the point as to the problem with the narrative here. That the narrative is about identity politics. I don't want to sort of get into. I'm making a more meta point here. I'm not okay. There is a side which is identity driven, but I'm saying that this has to be a contributing factor, right? On some level, not that again race or identity is a contributing factor, but the fact that one side is going to pitch it extensively. That okay, people of a certain community, right? We began earlier in the podcast, right? Biden saying that, listen, are you even black if you're not voting for me, right? Or perhaps something like we see on the screen right now, right? Perhaps Jeremy saying that if Trump wins re-election, some white people, no one else, right? And we see, and this is quite possible, right? If you look at Ohio and we compare it to sort of this one, Florida, we see that there is again a surge in terms of sort of Hispanic vote share for Trump, right? That's pretty much it in terms of so at least Florida and how that's turned out to be, and that's the case with even Ohio for that matter in terms of the vote share in comparison to Hillary Clinton. That I think Biden's sort of not outperforming, or like she outperformed Biden by about 10-15 points, or just on sort of the Hispanic vote share, which is about 12% in the state. Right, again, we're not looking at the exact figures here in front of us, but on some level, this is also indicative of sort of a sense of arrogance, which is associated. I remember, like, I think it was in Bronx. I'm not aware of the exact sort of district, but in New York, I think there were a couple of rallies taken out by sort of a group of Orthodox Jews, right? Sort of even older people in the community, and there was such. I would say disdain for it. I think that's what I would say in terms of the comments that were sort of coming in on that. They said, okay, this is practically a voice being raised for fascism and the like. And I'm sure that narrative will sort of start to play once again once the election is over. And I mean, if let's say Donald Trump wins on some level, it's going to come back. But I think it's quite sad, right? On some level, that's being associated, or the sort of role that you sort of start playing identity politics, on the sense that okay, there is this is not just even a sense of sort of let's say stretching it on the law of large numbers. I'm not even on that, and we're not on the sense that okay, indicative of sort of racism or otherwise, but the idea that you have such kind of sort of comments coming. And again, I'm not just in this. I'm also on, let's say, the Orthodox Jew sort of rally that was carried out in sort of New York. And are there any sort of just short comments in this before we sort of get back to the map? I think I will get back to the map now. So, but any just very brief comments on this.
Sure. My brief comment is this. Sure, Biden did make those comments about if you don't vote for me, if you're black and don't vote for me, are you even black? But I think Biden was perhaps the least identitarian of the Democratic Party candidates. Absolutely. And the least left wing. So, in a lot of ways, the Democratic Party has said, no, that's not the way to go. The Democratic talking heads on TV and the, social media outreach campaigns by some people and a lot of the, proxies might not have completely discarded that. But at a political selection level, it's a move away from identitarianism and the further left policies. His VP pick is suspect, maybe, but apart from that, Biden himself is the least identitarian and the least left wing. He's almost a neocon in a lot of ways.
Sure. I think that's there. But on some level, we also didn't see a real primary contest playing out, Arjun. Right? Post the very initial bits, where you had some of the younger candidates sort of winning a state here and there, after Biden won his first state in the primary process, all of them sort of dropped out right away. Mm-hmm. Right? And we saw how the Democratic Party treated Tulsi Gabbard and still continues to treat Tulsi Gabbard. Right. So I think that's a question that the party has to decide by itself. We see Labour sort of deciding that for themselves in the United Kingdom at this point. But ultimately, within the party, you are to take a further extreme stand, or you sort of go down the far socialist way, or the far sort of SJW sort of way, for the lack of a better phrase here, right? On some level, we see this with Britain. I think it also applies to America. Right? If you look at the Democrats in the past, right? If you look at Bill Clinton, I think you cannot say that on any economic issue, Bill Clinton was a leftist. Right? Or was a socialist or a communist. Right? I personally believe that Bill Clinton has done more for Wall Street. And this is the sort of joke that sort of Mr. J.P. Morgan himself. But the same idea sort of translates across the pond to Brits as well, right? You are Tony Blair, right? And Arjun has sort of been on this quite well. That Tony Blair was there for a long period of time. He was a Labour politician. He remained Prime Minister. Why? Because he was not on the economic level. Plain and simple. Right?
In fact, Tony Blair deleted the appeal to socialism from the party's vision.
Yes.
One of the things he wanted to do was this nationalization, was what they kept pushing, but Tony Blair deleted that for creating a new Labour, like they like to call themselves.
Exactly, and that's what kept him in power. Right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, these sort of what we call, whether sort of old democracies or whether we want to call them, let's say, countries that didn't succumb to communism. There has to be some sort of robustness within the population for that kind of system. Dhananjay, as students of law, if you were to sort of say these are sort of common law jurisdictions, and sort of in a sense that has sort of gone well with the approach that okay, we have to preserve the markets as well on some level, right? So that's there. But let's sort of we can sort of continue this, and we will continue this tonight as well, when we will get back to this. And it's not like we're sort of ending our podcast with this session either right away. I'm hoping that both of you are sort of still inclined towards sort of looking at the numbers. And let's first go back to Florida, because I think we're in on 96. And then we'll also perhaps look at very briefly some of the senatorial. Okay, I think this is pretty much it, right? I think I don't think there's anything that remains I think, okay, these county-wise results aren't really coming up here. But I think this is for Trump. I don't think we need to sort of revisit this. Any comments on that, Arjun or Dhananjay?
The Florida is definitely Trump. I mean,
Right? I think
it's
that's pretty
highly.
much.
Even
I think
New
there's
York Times has it
96%.
as more than 95% likelihood of Trump.
Yeah. So I think we don't need to sort of get to that. But yes, let's look at some of the other states again. Ohio is nearing a 90%, right? And this is Trump's leading by a decent margin here, right? With about 90% vote coming in.
But keep in mind the
is-
description.
Sorry. Oh yes.
But if you hover over Ohio, you see the November 13th written the bottom. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't think it'll be a huge swing sufficient
Yeah.
to, make Biden win, but it's nonetheless something. It's probably one of the reasons they have not yet announced the state.
Okay, yeah, I think that's quite a fair point, Arjun. I would agree with you that on some level there's some scope for Biden to wriggle out a very sort of miraculous victory out of this.
So Fox News has already called Arizona for Biden, actually.
Oh,
While ABC and
okay.
AP have not, Fox News have called Arizona for Biden.
On a similar note, I
let's
think
go to
NDTV has
Arizona.
already elected Donald Trump for president. So.
I'm sorry?
I said NDTV
Yeah,
is
okay,
already
so that's what they're saying, right?
announced
The
Donald Trump as the
vote by
president.
even New York Times suggests pretty much the same thing. That again, I think they're just voting in for that rest of the, let's say 25% vote share to come in. But I think yes, I think it's still going to be difficult for Trump to win from there.
Definitely, yeah.
Let's look at some of the counties here. Yeah, okay. So this is like Trump, Biden still have like 55% Santa Cruz. Okay, yeah, you can look at the difference there. Right? Sure, it's not as much in terms of sort of total population as Phoenix. Here is we see, yeah, now that's where you see the real numbers coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's sort of Biden has a decent sort of majority over there. At the same time, you have about 66% coming in here. Oh wow, look at that. So I think yeah, even in the sort of smaller areas, Trump's winning in whether you have 10, 12,000 odd voters, pretty much the same here as well. Yeah, I think it would be safe to say that Arizona is going to sort of go down the Biden way. So I don't think there's going to be much in the sense of debate there. Again, the way I think Ohio sure is sort of still closer in that sense, but the way Biden wins Ohio,
It's
I think Trump
highly
has to
unlikely.
do a lot more. Right? I'm just making the comparison here that it's going to be far tougher for Trump to win Arizona from here than it is going to be for Biden to win Ohio. And I don't think it's going to be easy for Biden to win Ohio either, right? And I'm also sort of...
No, I'm almost certain that Biden will not win Ohio.
Yeah. Again, I'm just on the fact that, okay, there is some sort of caveat. I think this is 90% in, right? So I think just on sort of the day, they're just saying that the ballots cast before would be reported by 8 p.m. Okay, they say by 8 p.m. So I take it that they would be reported by them, not sort of after that.
Sure, but something to keep in mind, it's estimated vote, it's not actual vote. So, I mean, you don't know how many postal ballots are going to come in, of course.
That's true. So that's, and for that, they still have like about 10 odd over a week.
Yeah.
So that's something, but yeah, just going by this, I think there's a significant advantage for Trump here. And then let's look at, I don't think Texas was in, again, yes, I don't think Texas is going to be an issue either. Right? Let's just look at Dallas here.
Texas is not going to be an issue, but looking at the vote share is telling, because I think in the previous election, Hillary Clinton only managed about 42 or 43%. This time round, it's around 46. Of course, all the votes are not yet in, but if the trend continues as is, that's a pretty big amount for the Democrats.
Yeah, but then again, ballots aren't like mail-in ballots aren't going to be something that
Texas needs to worry about.
Biden can count on, right? So I don't think that's, again, extremely unlikely for Biden to sort of make it in Texas either. So again, the picture as it looks right now is, let's look at, okay, this is what has been at least called. By the way, this includes Virginia, yeah? This 209 number includes 13 votes from Virginia, which, by the way, let's have a look. Is okay, fine. Now it's going for Biden, right? They called it earlier.
Right.
We thought that okay, fine, they need to wait a bit. But now I think Biden has a sizable lead. I think is it coming from Richmond again? Okay, so Richmond has got some numbers. Okay, Norfolk has a decent sort of margin for Biden here, and then you have some of the larger. Okay, there you go. Right, that's quite a margin there. So I think that's what seals it for Biden. I think that's what they were sort of waiting for to sort of. Okay, Fairfax is okay. See, this is what I think Karthik had brought up, and now the numbers seem to be entirely in Biden's favor. So let's just go with the fact that Biden's won Virginia as well, and it was sort of called by most outlets earlier. Again, I think Hillary also won this in 2016 by a decent margin, but
Decent
I think
margin,
she also
yes.
had the benefit of I think the vice presidential Tim Kaine's home state was Virginia, if I'm not wrong.
I'm not certain. I do not remember. Tim Kaine was not a very memorable person.
I think yes, that's quite true. That's quite true. But I think one thing they could rely on was to sort of for him to carry his home state. Nonetheless, I think let's just get a sense of they just called Ohio.
They just called Ohio, yes.
Yeah, they did again when we were touching upon it, they called Ohio for Trump with about 90% coming in. Again, I think this again requires us to sort of build up on a subscription, but let's just sort of go back to the screen. Let's look at a bit of the commentary that's also coming on the side. I think there was this comment on Trump sort of doing well with white blue collar voters. I think in Turnbull County, I think this is the fourth comment here, the fifth one. Let's sort of just, I find it a bit difficult as to how the latest updates are to be. Okay, I don't think I'll be able to sort of scroll down these latest updates. But yeah, one of these was showing that Trump is doing better with sort of blue collar voters, better than he was in 2016 and better than sort of Obama. So
yes,
that's something that is coming, right?
And surprisingly, the one of those latest updates, I remember seeing that the unions are surprisingly in parts of the Rust Belt breaking for Trump, which is something again not surprising compared if you look at the 2016 results, but yeah.
That's there. Okay. Let's have a look at Pennsylvania again. We have 55% coming in here. That's quite a lead for Trump, but again, I think it's too early to call it. Right?
It is.
Yeah.
So, Hawaii has just been called, of course.
Yeah, I think Hawaii is something that we wouldn't want to worry about at all. Unless perhaps Tulsi Gabbard joins the Republican Party, runs, and then sort of goes on to become the first female president of the United States. I mean, assuming it happens in the next few decade or so. Again, there's a far remote possibility. See, I made it a point to bring this up because if at all this happens in the next decade or so, we can at least claim that we made this prediction on election day.
Back in 2020.
So, but yes, again.
I mean, there is a possibility that Kamala Harris could be the first president if Biden resigns midway through his term.
Yes, and we were planning to sort of bring this up only later in the night, but I think there's a very valid point, and I think Trump has emphasized quite a lot on this, that sort of Halloween video, and know who you're voting for, and all of that. But a lot of people are saying, one, because of Biden's condition, I don't want to sort of comment on sort of the details because, again, we're not privy to the entirety of the facts there. But his comments in the media, him forgetting very often, and obviously his age, right? Just keeping aside sort of everything else, there is the question of age there. And that's something that could, if Biden-Harris ticket wins, that could make Harris the first female president of the United States.
Something just 1 second of note. If you go down to the Battleground States information, just scroll down. Georgia is now favored to win by Biden. 61%, which is interesting.
Wait, Georgia?
If you look at this,
No.
the GA.
Yeah, Georgia, right?
Yeah, there's a 61% Biden leaning.
Really? That's interesting. But
I mean,
wait, the
the
margins quite a lot, no?
sure, but the urban vote is probably not yet fully counted.
What is the okay? The 78% in. Oh,
Yes,
they're calling it for Biden.
they're
Okay,
saying
this is
Biden. They're
yeah,
saying it's likely
yeah.
a Biden win.
Slight. Okay, let's have a look at the there it is with about 80% in. Trump has a difference of about what this is about 8% votes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big lead. I'm surprised that they're favoring Biden because at the start of the day it was about 82%. Not start of the day, about an hour ago it was 82% favored for Trump.
Okay, so Fulton County is where I think, if at all the magic happens for Biden, because earlier in the morning we received this report that there's this room full of ballots, and there's a water pipe burst. I don't know if you followed this.
Yes. I remember you mentioning. Yes.
Yes. So I think that is something, I don't know to what extent that sort of contributes to such a forecast. But again, it was in Fulton County, and we are looking at Biden sort of significantly leading in this area. And though this is only 58% of the vote in yet, but if at all Biden is to win, I think these are the areas. Let's look at Clark County. Clark County also gives about 70-30. I think there's a similar margin here, right? The 74-25, there's 70-30. So I think that's a similar margin. Again, the other areas is at 55. Again, this is another 70 here. Rockdale gives. So the lesser number of votes here, right? In terms of this is 35 odd votes, 30,000 odd votes. But with Fulton County you have sort of over 300,000 voters here. At least like yet. So I think that number is almost a double. So that's going to be something that Biden's relying on to ultimately win, if at all. Right? Dhananjay, any comments that you'd like to make on either of these? Or Arjun, if you'd like to comment? Okay. Yeah, I think so. If at all Biden wins Georgia or has a chance there, then it's going to come from these areas, right, where he sort of has had these leads, right? And again, the very strong urban centers. I can be wrong on my sort of population distribution geography here, but I'm guessing that's what it is. I think, again, Florida, they haven't moved much from.
No, but if you look at the needle, it's now gone from like to 68% Biden. I'm quite surprised. See, not the vote share, the likelihood of victory.
Needle.
The needle,
Oh yes, this is despite the fact that Trump's leading by 8 points with 80% in. Let's have a look at what's the mail-in ballot law pertaining to Georgia. Couple of days by Wednesday. Right? Okay, Wednesday is tomorrow. Okay, so again, that's the current status. I think we should also sort of get close to. So we're getting close to about 11 a.m. So let's sort of.
Yes, I'm going to have to leave soon.
Yeah.
Well.
We were also going to call this session to close. Everyone who's with us has been with us all this while. We will be joining in back again at 9 p.m. tonight, where we'll be looking at perhaps a more accurate representation of what the election looks like. We'll be getting in expert comments from Mr. Praveen Swami, who'll be talking about foreign policy implications. We'll be getting in Mr. Yashwant Deshmukh, who will be talking about, obviously, the art and science, if I may, of polling, and comments on sort of how the polling has been. But how it looks right now is 213 for Biden, 136 for Trump. Let's assume Arizona goes the Biden way, Nevada also goes the same way. There's not much other big change from last time around. Let's look at sort of North Carolina going to, this is perhaps could be close. This could be close. So North Carolina? Yeah, it could be close. The Trump's leading with 95% in. Okay, and they say that, okay, they're expected first. The Democrat votes are sort of expected first. So that's something that is going to sort of favor them. But at the same time, there will be, I'm sure it will sort of go on for over the course of the night. Okay, so this is going to be close and it might be decided tonight. Pennsylvania is going to take a while. There's a good possibility it sort of goes into the Supreme Court itself. Michigan is Trump's leading, but there's hardly any vote share coming in at this point. And as far as Wisconsin is concerned, there's a marginal lead for Trump, but again, we still have about 35, 33 odd percent votes still come in. Florida.
Nevada is also interesting. It's less than 1%, but it's quite strongly pro-Trump right now.
Which one?
Nevada.
Again, but again, less than 1% is not going to make a. I don't want to pull off an NDTV from last Bihar elections, where Mr. Roy had sort of called it. I think I remember watching that live, and it was, I think, about 8 a.m. or so in the morning. I don't recall what the exact time was, 8 or 9 a.m. And he called a Bihar election. Right? That's and even this year, I think we hope that we can have a conversation on that as well. I think we're getting some comments and bringing Arjun back. We have Arjun here already. Clearly, Ayan is requires some sort of vision support. He's having some sort of identification problems. Okay, again, we're not getting we're not going to be sort of addressing many questions right now because the clear picture is still not there. But for our audience, we will be sort of getting back tonight at 9 p.m. IST, where we'll be talking about. Hopefully, the result should be slightly more clear. I'm not sure if we can sort of give a final picture even at that point, but we hope that we can get a more accurate picture at that point. Thank you so much, Dhananjay, for joining in. Thank you so much, Arjun, for joining in. I think this has been quite interesting. And thank you so much. We hope that we'll also get both of you on in the evening, right? And we'll sort of continue to track this through the day, right? Feel free to sort of share, subscribe, like, and you can press the bell icon so that you get an update when we go live tonight on our YouTube channel. Right. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We will join you guys tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay.